The galaxy had never seen anyone like Princess Valira. Her people, the Nightborn vampires, were ancient and feared. They had lived for thousands of years, mastering the art of survival, science, and war. Their castles floated in the dark spaces between stars, and their ships glimmered with energy so bright that they could blind any approaching fleet. Everywhere she went, she carried an aura of command. Alien princes from countless empires had tried to win her favor, each hoping that marrying her would give them access to her power, her knowledge, and her influence. They believed that she was a prize, a treasure to claim, and they approached her with flattery, threats, and promises of conquest. Valira had grown used to their attention. She could sense the intentions of anyone who came near her, and she had learned to read the subtle signs of desire, greed, and ambition. The alien princes were all the same in the end. They measured worth in armies, in fleets, in rare metals and exotic resources. But she measured worth differently. To her, character mattered, wisdom mattered, courage mattered. And most of all, she valued someone who could stand beside her, not beneath her. This particular day, the Crimson Court buzzed with the presence of dozens of visitors from distant stars. The air was filled with the hum of engines, the flicker of holographic displays, and the low murmur of translators converting languages too numerous to count. Every corner of the court was occupied by emissaries bearing gifts, each trying to outshine the other. One brought a miniature sun, carefully contained in a crystal sphere. Another offered a fleet of warships, sleek and deadly. Yet another displayed weapons capable of breaking planets. They all knelt, bowed, or performed intricate gestures, each hoping that the princess would notice them. Valira observed quietly. She sat on her high throne, a simple chair carved from the black stone of a dead asteroid, yet radiating elegance. Her long silver hair fell over her shoulders like liquid light, and her violet eyes scanned the room with patience. She listened as they spoke, her mind calculating, her heart unshaken. None of these beings interested her, not truly. They were predictable, and she had seen this countless times before. Then, from the far end of the hall, a quiet presence entered. There was no fanfare, no attempt to impress, and no one paid much attention. He was a human, Ethan Cole. He was assigned to the Crimson Court as an observer, representing a human faction that had little power compared to the great empires of the stars. His ship was modest, his clothes plain, and he carried nothing that would make an alien prince jealous. To most of the court, he was barely noticeable. Valira noticed him immediately. She could sense the calm in him, the lack of ambition to dominate or manipulate. He did not kneel. He did not bow. He did not attempt to impress her with gifts or words of flattery. Instead, he observed the court with quiet curiosity, taking note of everything but interfering in nothing. His demeanor was so unusual that even some of the alien princes glanced at him with confusion and irritation. Ethan approached the princess's throne slowly, but not timidly. When he spoke, his voice was clear and steady. "Your Highness," he said, "I am here to observe, to learn, and to report on the affairs of this court. I hope my presence will not cause disturbance." Such arrogance. But perhaps that is reason enough to be truthful. Valira found herself intrigued. She had been alive for centuries, and she had never met anyone like him. She wanted to know more about this species that dared to enter her court without bowing, without fear, and without desire for her power. Days passed, and Ethan remained at the court, quietly observing, taking notes, and asking questions. He asked about the history of the Nightborn vampires, about the science behind their ships, about their culture, and about the choices that had shaped their civilization. The alien princes mocked him at every opportunity, calling him naive, foolish, and insignificant. Yet he continued, undeterred, learning more with each passing day. Valira watched him carefully. She began to see patterns in the human's thinking, ways that he approached problems that were completely different from the aliens. He considered consequences, thought about others, and valued life in a way that her people, with their immortality and long history of conquest, sometimes forgot. One evening, a message arrived from a neighboring empire, warning that they intended to seize the court by force. They believed that with Valira under their control, they could dominate the galaxy. Panic spread among the alien princes, but Ethan remained calm. He offered suggestions for evacuation routes, safe zones, and communication protocols. His ideas were simple but effective, using logic and creativity rather than overwhelming force. Valira was astonished. The human, who had no weapons, no armies, and no special powers, was able to contribute in ways that even the most experienced alien generals had overlooked. She realized that his species had something unique, the ability to adapt, to work together, and to think in ways that her long-lived kind had forgotten. The first attack came at dawn. Ships from the neighboring empire emerged from the dark space surrounding the Crimson Court. They were sleek, fast, and deadly, but they underestimated the defenders. Valira's people fought fiercely, using centuries of strategy and technology. But the human, Ethan, coordinated civilians helped guide reinforcements and anticipated the enemy's moves. His ingenuity saved countless lives. During the chaos, Valira found herself relying on him. She gave orders, but she watched as he executed complex maneuvers, guiding those around him with calm authority. She realized that this human, weak in body but strong in mind, had courage that many immortals could never possess. He risked himself not for power, not for glory, but to protect others. After the battle, the court was in shambles. Ships were damaged, and alliances were shaken. The alien princes were defeated or fled, embarrassed and angry. They could not understand how a human could make a difference where so many powerful beings had failed. Valira, however, understood. She had seen humanity's true strength. It was not in raw power or immortality. It was in courage, creativity, and the will to protect others even when the odds were against them. She approached Ethan in the quiet aftermath. The hall was empty now, save for a few survivors cleaning up the debris. "You did not fight for power," she said. "You did not fight for reward. You fought for others, and in doing so, you showed more strength than any prince here. And yet, perhaps being human is exactly what makes you so remarkable. Perhaps it belonged to those who understood courage, loyalty, and the value of life." As night fell over the Crimson Court, Valira looked out at the stars, the distant points of light that held countless worlds and civilizations. She knew that her life, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy, was about to change. A human had entered her court without fear, without ambition, and without desire for her power, and he had captured her attention in a way that no alien prince ever had. For the first time, Valira wondered if the stories she had been told for centuries were wrong. Perhaps strength was not only measured in years, fleets, or weapons. Perhaps the human species, weak and short-lived as they were, held something far more powerful. A heart that refused to yield, a mind that could think beyond convention, and a courage that could shine brighter than any star. She did not yet know what the future held. The alien princes would not forget this human, and they would not forgive the loss of their chance to claim her favor. But Valira, for the first time in her long life, felt a flicker of hope. A new story was beginning, one that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. And at the center of it, quietly but surely, was a human who dared to be himself. Ethan Cole had never imagined that observing a court of alien royalty would become so dangerous. The day after the battle, the Crimson Court was quiet but tense. Ships floated in the docks, some damaged and smoking, while crews scrambled to repair them. The alien princes who had come to impress Princess Valira were gone, scattered back to their own empires, either humiliated or plotting revenge. Their absence did little to ease the court's unease. Even though the immediate threat had been defeated, the galaxy was still full of powers that might not forgive the human's role in the defense. Valira moved through the court with her usual grace, but now she seemed more thoughtful, almost contemplative. She had watched Ethan during the battle, noticed his quick thinking, and the way he inspired courage in others who had little reason to hope. For centuries, she had met beings who desired her for what she could give them: power, technology, immortality. But here was someone who did not seek anything from her, and yet he had changed the course of events in ways she could not have predicted. Ethan had been assigned quarters near the court's library, a place filled with records of centuries of vampire history, star maps, and technical manuals from countless civilizations. He spent hours reading, not because he wanted power, but because he wanted to understand. He learned about Valira's people, their battles, their triumphs, and their mistakes. Unlike most humans, he was capable of absorbing knowledge quickly and thinking critically about it. He did not boast about what he knew. Instead, he asked questions, wanting to learn more. One afternoon, Valira entered the library quietly while Ethan was studying star charts. She observed him for a moment, noting how he traced lines between systems, calculated distances, and considered potential strategies for trade and defense. "You are different," she said softly, startling him. Ethan looked up, startled, but he smiled politely. "I only try to think clearly," he said. "I cannot help what I see. Even those who have lived for thousands of years miss things that you notice. It only means we must learn quickly, and we must act wisely." The calm of the library, however, was broken later that evening by an urgent alert. Scouts reported that a coalition of alien powers, angry at the failure of their initial attempt to seize the Crimson Court, was gathering nearby. They intended to attack again, and this time they would not hold back. Panic began to ripple through the remaining princes and their entourages. Most had little interest in risking themselves again, but some were determined to seize the court no matter the cost. Valira convened a meeting in the main chamber, calling in all of the remaining court officials and military leaders. Ethan was allowed to participate as an advisor. The room was tense, filled with beings from dozens of species, each speaking in their own language, translated by shimmering holographic devices. Valira listened carefully to their suggestions and plans. Most were predictable: wait for reinforcements, negotiate, or attack first. But Ethan offered a different perspective. "We cannot rely on strength alone," he said. "The coalition is large, yes, but they are overconfident. They assume we will fight in the same way we always have. We need to use what they do not expect. Civilian crews, hidden defenses, and knowledge of local systems can give us an advantage if used wisely. He is barely trained for diplomacy. It is about making them doubt themselves, about creating opportunities for us to respond before they can strike." He trained volunteers in basic defense techniques, showing them how to operate ships and coordinate communications efficiently. Many of the volunteers were civilians, inexperienced and nervous, yet they gained confidence under his guidance. He treated them with respect, listened to their concerns, and encouraged them to think for themselves. Valira watched silently as Ethan worked. She had seen countless beings attempt to command loyalty through fear, manipulation, or promises of reward. But this human did not need to dominate. He earned trust through competence, kindness, and clear thinking. In a way she had not expected, she felt admiration and something deeper, an understanding that strength was not always measured in years, weapons, or fleets. When the coalition's fleet finally arrived, it was larger and more advanced than the first. Alien ships glinted under distant stars, engines blazing, ready to crush the Crimson Court. The alien princes inside the court bristled with anger and fear. They had underestimated the human presence before, but now they were forced to watch as a mortal being moved among them with calm purpose, guiding defenders, coordinating attacks, and directing civilians to safety. Ethan's plan relied on clever misdirection. Defensive ships were hidden behind asteroids, and false signals created illusions of larger forces than actually existed. When the enemy fleet attempted to enter the court, they were met with unexpected resistance and confusion. Civilians evacuated in small groups, using hidden corridors and emergency transport pods, while trained volunteers engaged in strategic skirmishes. The coalition was unprepared for such tactics, and their confidence began to crumble. Valira herself took command of several ships, using centuries of experience to complement Ethan's human ingenuity. Together, they orchestrated the defense, combining vampire technology with human problem-solving. At one point, a critical ship was surrounded, and all seemed lost. Ethan remained calm, issuing precise instructions that allowed the crew to escape, saving lives that would have been lost if anyone had acted recklessly. The battle raged for hours. When it was over, the coalition was forced to retreat. Their leaders, humiliated and frustrated, could not understand how a human had contributed to such a victory. The alien princes who had come seeking Valira's hand were equally shocked, some angry, some envious, and some beginning to doubt their assumptions about humanity. After the battle, the court gathered in the main hall. Survivors moved quietly, repairing damage and tending to the wounded. Valira approached Ethan once more, her eyes thoughtful. "You have proven something remarkable," she said. "Not through power or weapons, but through courage, intelligence, and care for others. I have seen many conquerors, many warriors, and many rulers. None have impressed me as you have. Humanity is not always about strength, but about heart. You have shown me that a mortal being can influence events in ways immortals cannot." Other species present in the court, witnessing Ethan's ingenuity, began to reconsider their assumptions about humanity. Valira realized that a new perception of humans was forming, a recognition that even short-lived beings could have courage and wisdom that surpassed long-lived civilizations. Ethan, unaware of the admiration growing around him, continued to work quietly. He helped repair damaged systems, guided ships back to safety, and checked on the well-being of civilians. In his simple and practical ways, he reinforced a lesson that Valira had long known but many had forgotten. Strength is not only measured in power, but in perseverance, in intelligence, and in the willingness to protect others even at personal risk. As night fell over the Crimson Court, Valira stood at a balcony overlooking the stars. Ethan's actions had not only saved lives, but also shifted the perception of humanity in the eyes of all who witnessed it. She realized that the galaxy was changing. Aliens who had underestimated humans were beginning to see them differently. Perhaps the stars themselves were ready to recognize humanity's potential. Valira's mind returned to Ethan. The human who had come quietly, without pomp or ambition, had become the center of her attention. His courage, intelligence, and humility had left a mark she could not ignore. For the first time in centuries, she felt a sense of anticipation, not for war or conquest, but for what this mortal being might teach her about strength, courage, and hope. In the quiet of the night, Valira understood that the story of the Crimson Court, and perhaps of the galaxy, was not yet written. A human had entered the court not to claim power, but to act with integrity and bravery. And in doing so, he had begun a story that might change the course of civilizations. The galaxy had underestimated humanity. Valira would make sure that lesson would not be forgotten. The days after the second battle were tense. The Crimson Court was no longer just a seat of vampire power. It had become a symbol of resistance and ingenuity. Word spread quickly among the stars about the human who had helped defend it. Some laughed, dismissing humanity as weak and short-lived, but others whispered with curiosity and caution. Humans had survived against impossible odds before. Perhaps this one had done more than anyone realized. Ethan Cole continued his work quietly. He moved among the wounded and the workers, offering guidance where needed, encouraging those who had lost hope, and studying the fleet to prevent further attacks. Even when praised by Valira or the remaining court officials, he remained humble. He did not seek recognition, only results. His calm presence became a stabilizing force in the court, and gradually, the alien princes and envoys who remained began to notice him differently. One morning, a message arrived from an intelligence network spanning multiple empires. A coalition of alien species, angered by their recent failures, was forming a fleet even larger than before. Their goal was clear: crush the Crimson Court and seize Princess Valira for themselves. Panic rippled through the court, but Ethan remained composed. He knew that this time, sheer courage and intelligence would be needed more than weapons alone. Valira called a meeting to discuss strategy. The surviving alien princes grumbled and whispered, unwilling to admit that a human might have valuable advice. Many assumed he would panic or misstep. Ethan, however, spoke calmly. They are confident because they believe in their numbers. That confidence can be used against them. We do not need to fight every ship head-on. We can slow their advance, redirect them, and use their own assumptions to create openings. Strategy is not about power alone. It is about timing, observation, and flexibility. She had seen it in Ethan, and she knew that his presence in the court might change the course of events far more than anyone realized. Over the next several days, preparations intensified. Ethan worked tirelessly with engineers, pilots, and volunteers. He taught civilians how to operate ships in emergencies, how to repair critical systems, and how to anticipate enemy movements. Each night, he returned to the library to study star maps, fleet formations, and the history of alien wars. He looked for patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities. Valira often joined him, not as a ruler giving orders, but as an observer eager to learn. She asked questions about human decision-making, morality, and how such a short-lived species could achieve so much with so little. Their conversations were quiet but intense, and slowly, a mutual respect developed between them. She admired his intellect, his courage, and his refusal to be swayed by fear or power. He admired her wisdom, her patience, and the way she could see beyond the superficial actions of others. Then the attack came. The coalition fleet appeared from hyperspace, massive and intimidating. Thousands of ships moved in formation, engines blazing, weapons primed. Many of the alien princes froze, uncertain how to respond. The civilians panicked and chaos threatened to take hold. Ethan, however, remained calm. He had anticipated their approach, predicted their maneuvers, and arranged the court's defenses accordingly. Split the fleet into sections, he instructed, moving among the command posts. Use the asteroids as cover, redirect signals to create false targets, evacuate non-combatants through the hidden corridors. Remember, we do not need to destroy every ship. We only need to survive long enough to force them to retreat. Together, human ingenuity and vampire experience created a defense that surprised the coalition. The alien forces expected chaos, but instead they found coordination, strategy, and clever tactics they had not anticipated. Many of their ships were damaged or misdirected, while the court's defenders remained largely unharmed. During the battle, Ethan noticed a group of young pilots struggling to navigate a narrow asteroid field. Without hesitation, he guided them with calm instructions, showing them how to use momentum, gravity, and cover to their advantage. They followed, and their successful maneuver delayed an entire squadron of enemy ships. Valira watched from the bridge, impressed by the humans' ability to lead without authority, to inspire without command. Hours passed. The coalition pressed harder, but every attempt was countered with careful planning. Civilians were safely evacuated, ships remained operational, and the enemy grew increasingly frustrated. They had underestimated the value of human adaptability, teamwork, and creativity. At one point, a massive enemy cruiser broke through the outer defenses and approached the main court station. The alien princes panicked, expecting immediate disaster. Ethan analyzed the situation quickly. He noticed a weak point in the cruiser's shield alignment and directed a small team of ships to exploit it. The maneuver worked flawlessly, disabling the cruiser without unnecessary loss of life. Valira stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You think like no one else I have ever met," she said. "You do not see limitations, you see possibilities. I do not have the centuries of training your people have. I have to think differently or we will fail." The Crimson Court had survived once again, not through overwhelming power, but through intelligence, courage, and the careful use of resources. After the battle, the court gathered to assess the damage. Ships were repaired and the wounded were tended to. The surviving alien princes were silent, humbled by the humans' contributions. Some were angry at having been outshone by a mortal. Others whispered quietly among themselves, beginning to question their assumptions about humanity. Valira approached Ethan once more. "You have done more than anyone could have expected," she said. "You have shown strength, courage, and wisdom beyond what many immortals possess. Humanity may be short-lived, but it has qualities that cannot be measured by age or power alone. I am just one part of a larger effort. Not because he was strong, immortal, or wealthy, but because he possessed qualities that could change the galaxy itself." Over the following days, Ethan continued to assist the court. He helped repair the starport, organize defenses, and train crews for future emergencies. Civilians and soldiers alike looked to him with respect and trust. The alien princes who had mocked him now observed quietly, their assumptions about humans slowly shifting. Some began to ask questions, seeking to understand the species that had survived and even thrived against impossible odds. Valira, meanwhile, found herself thinking more about Ethan than she had expected. She had ruled for centuries, seen countless beings rise and fall, and experienced the complexities of power in ways few could imagine. Yet this human, fragile and short-lived, had done what many could not: earn her respect, challenge her perceptions, and demonstrate that even the smallest beings could have a profound impact on history. At night, the two would sometimes walk together in the quiet halls of the court. They spoke of philosophy, strategy, morality, and life. Ethan asked questions about vampire history, about the ethics of immortality, and about the choices Valira had made. She asked him questions about humanity, about courage, and about the values that allowed a species so fragile to endure. Each conversation deepened their understanding of each other and built a bond based on mutual respect and trust. The galaxy outside, however, was not at peace. Reports came of other fleets preparing to move, other powers considering attacks, and other threats that could challenge the court's safety. Yet, despite the uncertainty, Ethan remained steady. He analyzed each new development, prepared contingencies, and worked with Valira to ensure that the Crimson Court would not only survive, but thrive. Valira realized that humanity's potential was far greater than most believed. While alien species measured strength by fleets, weapons, or longevity, humans measured strength differently. They measured it by courage, by intelligence, by the willingness to act when the moment demanded it. Ethan embodied these qualities, and through him, Valira began to see the galaxy in a new light. The court slowly returned to a sense of routine, but the lessons of the battle remained. Alien powers that had underestimated humanity began to whisper, reconsider, and rethink. The story of the human who had defended the Crimson Court spread, not through boastful announcements, but through the awe and respect of those who witnessed his actions. Valira stood on her balcony one evening, gazing at the stars. The galaxy was vast, full of danger, opportunity, and uncertainty, yet she felt a flicker of hope she had not known in centuries. A human had arrived quietly, acted bravely, and demonstrated that even short-lived beings could shape the course of civilizations. Perhaps the future of the galaxy would not be determined by fleets or power alone, but by courage, intelligence, and the willingness to do what is right even when the odds are against you. She looked at Ethan as he walked past, organizing repairs, checking supplies, and speaking with crew members. The human who had arrived unnoticed now stood at the center of a story that would be remembered across the stars. Valira knew that the galaxy was changing, and that she would be part of that chain. But she also knew that humanity, fragile yet unyielding, had begun to teach her lessons she could not have learned in 1,000 years. And so, the stage was set for what was to come. The coalition of alien powers might regroup, new threats might emerge, but the strength of humanity, its courage, its intelligence, its heart, was already proving itself. The Crimson Court, once a symbol of power and fear, had become a place of learning, strategy, and hope. And at its center stood a human who, by simply being himself, had begun to redefine the galaxy. The Crimson Court had survived again, but the victories had not gone unnoticed. Across the galaxy, intelligence reports reached empires that had once laughed at humanity. Now whispers and rumors spread of a human who had stood against impossible odds, a mortal who had helped an ancient princess defend her throne. Some dismissed it as exaggeration. Others were curious, quietly wondering how such a fragile species could achieve so much. Within the court, Valira moved with a sense of purpose. She had spent centuries judging beings by their strength, their fleets, or their political influence. She had seen countless rulers rise and fall, all seeking power, all seeking her favor. Yet Ethan had shown her something different. He had no desire to rule, no need to impress with wealth or weapons. He acted from reason, from courage, from loyalty to others. That made him remarkable, and she could not deny it. Valira called a council to discuss the growing threat. Reports suggested that the coalition of alien powers was gathering again, more determined than before. This time, they would not be content to retreat. They intended to take the court by force, believing it was the only way to gain control of the region. The surviving princes muttered amongst themselves, worried but unwilling to admit that a human had made the previous defense possible. Ethan entered the council quietly. He had spent the morning reviewing intelligence and preparing suggestions. "We need to be proactive," he said simply. "Waiting for them to act will give them the advantage. We must anticipate their moves, create distractions, and use their assumptions against them. Intelligence, preparation, and adaptability will." Ethan moved among the engineers, technicians, and civilian volunteers. He taught them how to use the court's defenses creatively, how to anticipate enemy movements, and how to work together under pressure. Many were inexperienced and fearful, yet under his guidance, they gained confidence. They learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Valira observed, noting how the human inspired others without ever demanding respect. She had seen rulers demand obedience, punish failures, and reward only loyalty to power. Ethan did none of these things. He treated others with respect, listened carefully, and guided them with patience. It was a form of leadership she had not witnessed in centuries, and she admired it. One evening, as repairs continued and the court prepared for the expected attack, Valira walked with Ethan through the corridors. "You have changed the way I see my people," she said softly. "Your species is fragile, yet you have shown courage, ingenuity, and loyalty that even centuries of life cannot guarantee. We have short lives, weak bodies, and few weapons, but we survive by learning, adapting, and helping one another. That is our strength." Perhaps it required the kind of courage and humility Ethan displayed every day. The warning came just after dawn. Scouts reported that the coalition fleet was approaching at full speed, vast in size and armed with weapons capable of devastating entire stations. Panic rippled through the court. Many alien princes froze, uncertain of how to respond. Civilians huddled, afraid of the approaching destruction. Ethan moved quickly. "We will not fight them head-on," he instructed. "We will divide their attention, use the terrain to our advantage, and rely on strategy over brute force. Stay calm, trust your training, and watch for signals." The coalition expected the court to be vulnerable, but they were wrong. Ethan's strategies created confusion among the enemy, forcing them to overextend their lines. Small groups of pilots, guided by his instructions, harassed the flanks while civilians evacuated through hidden corridors. Every move was calculated to maximize efficiency and minimize risk. Valira directed the court's defenses with centuries of experience, complementing Ethan's strategies. Together, human ingenuity and vampire wisdom created a defense that was both unexpected and highly effective. Enemy ships were misdirected, communication lines disrupted, and morale began to collapse. At one critical moment, a massive cruiser broke through the outer defenses. The alien princes panicked, expecting immediate disaster. Ethan quickly analyzed the situation and directed a small squad to exploit a weak point in the cruiser's shields. The maneuver worked perfectly, disabling the ship without unnecessary destruction. Valira's respect for him deepened. His thinking was precise, quick, and adaptable, able to respond to threats that even centuries of experience might not have anticipated. Hours passed, the battle raging in waves. Civilians worked with volunteers to repair damage and maintain communications. Young pilots, inspired by Ethan's calm confidence, executed maneuvers they had never attempted before. Slowly, the coalition began to falter. Their formations broke, signals failed, and frustration spread. They had underestimated the human and the people of the Crimson Court, and it was costing them dearly. Finally, the enemy retreated. The coalition fleet, unable to overcome the defenses or anticipate the strategies in play, withdrew into the depths of space. The Crimson Court had survived again, not through overwhelming firepower, but through intelligence, courage, and coordination. The alien princes who had doubted humanity were silent, humbled, and forced to reconsider their assumptions. In the aftermath, the court assessed the damage. Ships were repaired and the wounded were treated. Civilians returned to their routines, now infused with a sense of confidence and pride. Ethan continued to guide them, teaching that strength is not measured in power alone, but in courage, intelligence, and the willingness to act when it matters most. Valira approached him in the quiet of the evening. "You have shown me a truth I have long suspected," she said. "Strength is not always measured by what is most visible. Your species, fragile as it is, possesses qualities that can change the fate of the galaxy. And yet it is enough to teach me more than I have learned in centuries." Aliens who had underestimated humanity began to reconsider their assumptions, realizing that even a short-lived species could make a lasting impact. Valira and Ethan continued to walk together in the quiet corridors, speaking of strategy, morality, and philosophy. They shared ideas about leadership, courage, and the potential of civilizations to grow not just through conquest, but through understanding and cooperation. Each conversation deepened the bond between them, built on mutual respect, admiration, and a shared vision of a galaxy that could be different. The galaxy beyond the Crimson Court remained dangerous. Other fleets would gather, new threats would emerge, and empires would continue to seek power. But Ethan's presence had shown that strength was not only in fleets or weapons. Intelligence, courage, and compassion could be just as decisive. The story of the human who had acted with bravery, humility, and skill had begun to reshape perceptions, not only within the court but across the stars. Valira realized that the galaxy was changing. For centuries, she had ruled and observed with caution, expecting betrayal and ambition at every turn. Now she saw potential, hope, and the power of humanity in action. She understood that her future and the future of the court was intertwined with the human who had quietly become its center. As night fell over the Crimson Court, Valira stood on a balcony overlooking the stars. Ethan was nearby, coordinating repairs, speaking with volunteers, and quietly inspiring everyone around him. The human had arrived unnoticed, had acted with courage, and had shown that even a short-lived species could shape history. The future remained uncertain. Enemies still lurked in the shadows, waiting for opportunities to strike. But the Crimson Court had learned a new lesson: power alone is not enough. True strength comes from intelligence, courage, and the willingness to protect others, even against impossible odds. Valira's violet eyes rested on Ethan as he moved through the hall, quietly guiding, calmly instructing, and inspiring confidence. She realized that the story of the court and perhaps the galaxy itself was no longer hers alone. Humanity had begun to leave its mark, not through conquest or domination, but through courage, intelligence, and a heart willing to act. The stage was set for what would come next. The coalition would regroup. New threats would emerge. Yet through it all, humanity's quiet power, The ability to adapt, to act, and to inspire had begun to reshape the galaxy. And at the center of it, standing beside Princess Valira, was a human who, simply by being himself, had changed everything. The galaxy was restless. Reports of other fleets, new alliances, and potential threats reached the Crimson Court daily. Many empires whispered about humanity, some with doubt, some with fear. The human who had helped defend the court had become a symbol, though he did not know it. Ethan moved quietly through the halls, organizing repairs, coordinating defense drills, and teaching civilians how to act under pressure. He had no desire for glory or recognition. He only wanted to ensure that lives were protected, that decisions were made wisely, and that those who depended on him could trust in their own strength. Valira watched him from her throne room, thinking about how much the human had changed everything. The alien princes who had once sought her favor had vanished, humiliated by their own arrogance and underestimation of humanity. They had assumed that short-lived, fragile humans could never matter in the vast galaxy, yet here was proof that courage, intelligence, and integrity could outshine fleets, armies, and centuries of experience. But the galaxy would not remain quiet forever. A new coalition was forming, composed of alien empires who refused to accept a human's influence over a vampire princess. They saw Ethan's involvement as a threat to the balance of power, and they believed that Valira could be forced into submission if they acted decisively. Valira called a council in the main hall. The atmosphere was tense. The surviving princes, advisors, and leaders of the court assembled, whispering about the new threat. Some wanted war, others wanted negotiation, but all were uneasy. Ethan, as always, entered quietly, carrying no airs of authority yet drawing attention through competence and calm judgment. "We have faced overwhelming forces before," he said simply, addressing the room. "This is no different. We must anticipate their moves, divide their attention, and act with precision. Strength alone will not save us. We must use strategy, intelligence, and unity. We rely on intelligence, courage, and cooperation. That will make the difference." It was a quality rare even among her own kind. Over the following days, preparations intensified. Civilians were trained, defense systems were repaired, and supply lines reinforced. Ethan worked with young Nightborn pilots, teaching them how to adapt to unpredictable situations. He coordinated teams of engineers, ensuring that every ship and station was ready for potential attack. He moved calmly among everyone, inspiring confidence without demanding it. Valira observed his work silently, often walking alongside him in the corridors. They spoke in quiet tones, discussing strategy, philosophy, and the nature of power. Ethan asked questions about her people, about immortality, and about the weight of centuries of responsibility. She asked about humanity, about courage, and about how short-lived beings could act decisively despite fear. Each conversation strengthened her respect and admiration for him. Then the warning came. The coalition fleet had mobilized, moving toward the Crimson Court with determination and firepower greater than any before. Alien empires had joined forces, hoping to crush both the court and the human who had become its center of strength. Panic rippled through the court. Civilians huddled, soldiers prepared, and the surviving princes braced for war. Ethan stepped forward, calm as ever. "Do not fear," he said. "We know their strengths and their weaknesses. We will divide their attention, exploit their assumptions, and protect those who cannot protect themselves. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it." Ships thundered through space, energy beams flashing, shields flaring. The coalition expected a vulnerable court, but they were wrong. Civilians moved through hidden corridors, young pilots executed maneuvers learned under Ethan's guidance, and defensive ships ambushed unsuspecting enemy squadrons. Every move was calculated, precise, and unexpected. Valira commanded alongside him, her centuries of experience complementing his human ingenuity. Together, they created chaos for the enemy, forcing their formations to break and their morale to falter. The coalition, expecting a straightforward victory, found themselves outmatched not by weapons, but by strategy, adaptability, and unity. At a critical moment, an enormous cruiser aimed directly at the court's central station. The alien princes panicked, expecting the destruction of centuries-old structures. Ethan analyzed the cruiser's movement, noting a pattern in its shield alignment. He directed a team of pilots to exploit it. The plan worked perfectly. The cruiser was disabled, sparing lives and structures and shocking the coalition commanders. Valira's admiration deepened. This human, with no enhancements, no centuries of life, had saved countless beings with intelligence and courage alone. She realized something she had long suspected but never fully appreciated. Strength is not always measured in power, longevity, or weaponry. It is measured in the willingness to act, to adapt, and to protect others, even against impossible odds. Hours passed. The coalition began to falter. Their formations broke, communication failed, and frustration spread among their ranks. One by one, their ships retreated, unable to achieve their objectives. The Crimson Court had survived again, not through raw power, but through intelligence, courage, and the quiet influence of a human who inspired confidence in everyone around him. After the battle, the court gathered to assess the aftermath. Ships were repaired, supplies replenished, and the wounded tended to. Survivors whispered about the human who had guided them to safety, realizing that his calm mind and courage had changed everything. The alien princes, humbled and forced to reconsider their assumptions, began to recognize humanity's potential in a way they never had before. Valira approached Ethan as the sun of a distant star reflected off the station's hull. "You have proven that even the smallest, shortest-lived beings can influence the fate of civilizations," she said. "I have seen what centuries of life can teach, yet your courage, intelligence, and humility have taught me more than I could have imagined. My species survives by adapting, by learning, and by helping each other. That is all I know. It belongs to those who act with courage, wisdom, and heart." Other civilizations began to take note, realizing that cooperation, intelligence, and courage could outweigh brute force and arrogance. Valira knew that the time had come to make a choice, one that would shape the future of the court and the galaxy itself. The alien princes had expected her to align with one of them, to choose a path of dominance, power, and political advantage. But she could not ignore what she had learned, that humanity, fragile and short-lived though it was, possessed qualities that the oldest civilizations sometimes lacked. She called Ethan to her side. "The galaxy expects me to choose," she said. "They expect me to ally with an empire, to secure power, to maintain control. But I have seen something that matters more. I have seen courage, intelligence, and heart. I have seen humanity. It will be built by courage, wisdom, and cooperation. I choose humanity." The human who had acted with courage and intelligence had earned something far greater than recognition: the trust and partnership of an ancient princess. From that day forward, the Crimson Court became a symbol of a new era. Humans and vampires worked side by side, sharing knowledge, defending the galaxy, and inspiring others to think differently about strength, courage, and leadership. Humanity's quiet power, the ability to adapt, to think, and to act with heart, began to shape the stars in ways previously unimaginable. Valira ruled beside humanity, not above it. She had learned that power alone was not enough, that courage, intelligence, and loyalty were what truly mattered. The galaxy began to take notice, and slowly, civilizations that had once dismissed humans began to reconsider. A species that many had underestimated had shown that true strength lies not in longevity or weapons, but in heart, mind, and action. Ethan continued to serve quietly, never seeking glory or reward. He taught others, guided them, and helped shape a galaxy that was beginning to value courage and intelligence over arrogance and conquest. And through it all, Valira watched, learning, listening, and recognizing that the human who had entered her court without ambition had become one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy, not through weapons or fleets, but through the qualities that made his species remarkable. The coalition of alien powers would regroup, new threats would emerge, and challenges would continue. But the galaxy had already been changed. The story of humanity's quiet courage, intelligence, and integrity had begun to spread, leaving an enduring mark on civilizations near and far. Valira looked out at the stars, reflecting on centuries of life and experience. She realized that the most unexpected beings, the fragile, short-lived humans, had shown her what she had been missing. Strength was not in domination or fear. Strength was in courage, wisdom, and heart. And at the center of that lesson stood a human named Ethan Cole, who had acted with nothing more than intelligence, bravery, and humility. He had changed the fate of a court, influenced an ancient princess, and inspired a galaxy. The stars themselves seemed to shine differently that night, as if recognizing the power of humanity, not through conquest, but through the quiet, unwavering force of character. Valira smiled, knowing that the galaxy's story had been rewritten, and that humanity had earned its place among the stars.